All right. Well, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to a new group of people in a school that's I have some connections to through Don Gregg, and would be interested in making more connections and learning more about business. So hopefully I'll learn as much as I can teach in this opportunity here. My goal is to answer your questions. So my outline is liberally splintered apart with an opportunity for you to ask me questions. So stop me at any point. And I probably think we can get to the most important stuff if need be by just jumping ahead to some of the tips I have for vibe coding. And if it's of interest, we could spend more time talking about an AI coded project that I'm launching tomorrow, next week as a SaaS product. So this is a first for me. I started a company a few months ago and uh, have been working using AI assisted coding to get something ready and out the door. So I'd be happy to talk about that. Um, Basics, I think, just to get us on the same page, there's many definitions of intelligence. I like the scientist Francois Chollet's definition of skill acquisition efficiency. And that's coupled to a metric that he uses to gauge the performance of new AI systems. And it's a good practical definition in the age of AI. We probably won't spend a lot of time talking about AGI or ASI. If I do, I'm just talking about these in the common way that they're referred to. There's a lot you could debate about these, and we could certainly come back to that. But for our purposes, in the topic of vibe coding, the tools that are currently available are very powerful, and they are getting better and will be probably near perfect before anything achieves something that would be commonly called AGI or ASI. The very basics of the tools we're using all come down to language models. And it should be known that these are built upon next token predictors, essentially next word predictors. And so these are very good at training on data. And then based on that training, they become very adept at predicting what the next word in a sentence is going to be. That's just the core. And there's a lot of other things that go into building these AI systems and these vibe coding tools, but they all are built upon language models that are next token or next word predictors. That technology is relatively new and has dominated AI research and the news for maybe 5 years or so because it's adhered to these so-called scaling laws, not scientific laws, but observations that the more you make available to a model in terms of the number of parameters that that neural network has, the amount of data that you provide to it, and the amount of compute power that you make available, all result in an increase that has not topped out yet in terms of better performance of that model in next token prediction. So that's driven the last few years of AI development. Uh, I've tried to put together here just a description of the parts of an LLM, since we'll talk about some of these as we move forward. So the core center part is called a transformer. So that next token predictor is based on a transformer architecture. And that might be presented to you by a different brand as a different model name that might vary based on the training data, the parameters, and the amount of training that went into it. And then we'll also use a number of things that go into this after that training is complete. And that includes fine-tuning, reinforcement learning, few-shot learning, chain of thought, retrieval augmented generation, and then these things, and tool use is a really important one. And that's essentially what vibe coding is a tool use built upon an underlying LLM. And these are then packaged sometimes as AI assistants or agents. Most of these vibe coding tools people would probably classify as AI agents, although the lines could blur between those. And a lot of these make use of reasoning models. So these, in addition to the computational time that goes into the pre-training, and there's also mid-training now, and the post-training, these also use computational effort at the time of inference, inference being the time that you're probing this trained GPT to get a response. So this is the latest era, and there's also scaling laws that show that this has the potential to lead to long-term improvements. So the way we access these LLMs is commonly through a web interface. So if you've used any of these, including ChatGPT, you're using a web interface to an application programming interface that interfaces with the underlying LLM. And you can also access these programmatically by writing code that can access the LLM. And then it's also important to note that you can host local versions of LLMs that allow you to avoid sharing data with these frontier models if that's a necessity. So I already mentioned that we start with a base model and then we do fine tuning in various stages. Recently, mid-tuning has been a way to update models so that they're more up to date in the cutoff of their knowledge. Um, and there's a lot of work being done in speeding up this life cycle and also optimizing it for different applications. And the chain of thought is one type of reasoning, and other models use more broad methods of reasoning. And this is reasoning, probably in quotes, is a good way to describe it because this is really still just using next token prediction, but in an iterative process of uh, taking the output of an initial request and then feeding that back into additional processes so that you can get additional effort from that next token predictor in a final answer that can take into account many of the steps that went along the way. So you get better results, better performance on benchmarks, if you use these types of processes to improve the output of your model. So by not just saying, give me the answer to this question, here's the question, you can get better results even just by saying, tell me how you would approach answering this question, and then asking for the answer. We'll talk more about how that relates to vibe coding and tips on how to improve things. So Andrej Karpathy is the namer of vibe coding. In the ancient history of vibe coding, that was in February. And he said, it's not really coding. I just see things, say things, run things, and copy and paste things, and it mostly works. So I don't like to be too particular about definitions, but I do like sticking to his definition of vibe coding, which is not looking at the code when you're coding. So I do try to draw a distinction between vibe coding and AI assisted coding, and I do both. And there's value to both, and maybe more limits to vibe coding, and therefore maybe more reason to think about transitioning to AI assisted coding, where I would say you're not restricted by refusing to look at the code. So I think if you have coding background, you're going to gravitate towards AI assisted coding. If you have no coding background, you're probably going to gravitate towards vibe coding. But even if you have no background in coding, I think that the new way of learning coding will be through vibe coding to see the outcomes first, encounter problems, hit walls of what you're able to accomplish, and then learn how to do those things in a practical, applied way rather than starting with the fundamentals. There'll still be a need to know those fundamentals and to learn those over time. But I think in a world in which you can build an app in minutes or hours, it's really hard to build that over years and have expect people to have the patience to wait on that. So I put this in the course, in the Coursera course, so if you've gotten that far and you've seen this breakdown, and that top left quadrant are what I would call the true vibe coding tools engineered to help you do the code execution and app development without requiring you to look at the code. But then also, I'd say in the bottom right corner are the tools that are really helpful if you do have some coding experience or just want to build that. I use Cursor a lot and Gemini Code Assist, but all of these are good tools for learning how to code and for building your skills from that vibe coding background. Um, Another point that I like to make is that one of the values of these LLMs is that they not just are expert at coding, but they also know other fields as well. So an example it comes to mind in this regard is a common tool you might add to a website, an application you're building would be an email client that interacts with your customers, for example. And this one comes to mind because I've done this twice, once pre-AI and once post-AI. And the AI gets it done very well. It really doesn't make many mistakes. And one of the benefits is that in addition to it having the code base, it knowing how to write the code to build this email client, it also understands human interactions. It knows how to get email etiquette right. When you ask it to write a template of an email, it makes it look good. It gets the text right. It understands security concerns in terms of how to store passwords and things like that. So there's a real advantage not just to having like a coding specific tool, but having a tool that has broad-based knowledge. So my advice in general is going to be to experiment, fail, and repeat. And also to realize that any tool you use, the lessons you learn in how to interact with that AI will probably carry over to other AI. So just even using ChatGPT for day-to-day things is going to give you the knowledge base and the mental know-how of interactions, and that those lessons you learn will carry over to using them in vibe coding tools or other AI tools.